Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this June rainy day edition of Tuesday Tea with Elsa. As you can see, I am in my tiny house. My dog Breeze is here. We're all cozy in the house, but right outside the window we have Atlas hiding behind the tree. Hi there, Christian. So I have to thank Sue for today's topic. She wrote in and asked me to talk about separation anxiety. Hi, George. Good to see you. Separation anxiety is really an interesting topic. All of us who have horses have at some point run into some difficulty with separation anxiety. I chose today to talk about it because I'm having a little bit of separation anxiety because I've been in quarantine for a couple of months now, and I've been with these horses every single day, and I have an obligation to get to the city this week, and I'm leaving on a ferry this afternoon, and I'm feeling a little nervous that I am stepping away from my horses for the first time in a really long time. So there is a little bit of separation anxiety for me today, and I figured it was a good time to talk about separation anxiety for horses. Horses are herd animals. They naturally live together. And that's what we're always told. What's interesting to me is when you study wild horses or feral horses, whatever you choose to call them, out on the range, some of the stallions choose not to be herd animals. Some of the stallions do choose to walk out on their own and not live with other horses. And that's really interesting to me, that for whatever reason, there are stallions that don't want to live in the bachelor bands and go live by themselves. I don't think I've heard of any mares that do this, but I have heard of stallions. So this is interesting to me because Atlas and Ari live in paddocks next to each other. And while they get to spend time together when I'm supervising, they actually do seem a lot happier in separate paddocks, which is very strange to me because I was raised with this idea that horses are herd animals. They need to be in a herd. And that would be true most of the time, but not all of the time. So I've been thinking about that. What causes a horse to have more attachment to the group or less attachment to the group? What causes separation anxiety when they can't be with their group? So George, you have a horse like that, Big Kenny. He likes being on his own quite a lot. Some of them are like that, and it's an interesting thing to consider. So I have some theories about this, as you would imagine. I have some theories about everything. And I think it has to do with patterns of feeling better or feeling worse. All of us have stress levels that go up and come down. And when stress goes up past a functional level, you feel bad. And when you feel bad, you try and defend yourself with fight, with flight, or with freeze. When you feel better, you start to become more socially interested. And being socially interested makes you more adaptable to the group. So you start having behaviors that are yielding, making room for others, playing, which is pushing into others in ways that make them feel better, not worse. These yielding and playing and thinking behaviors make it very easy to be part of a group. When stress gets too high and you have fight, flight, and freeze behaviors, it gets a little harder to be in a group unless the group is exactly like you. So I think separation anxiety comes from patterns of what helped you go from a worse feeling to a better feeling. All of us have high stress moments. It's just natural. When we have a high stress moment, what helps us lower the stress until we feel functional again. If the thing that helps us lower that stress is a friend or a horse, we're going to start feeling really attached to them. So over the last couple of months, I've been in quarantine. I'm here all the time. You can see Atlas behind me. He's out my window all the time. When I feel stressed, I spend time with him or with Ari. And these two horses have become a huge source of helping me lower my stress and feel better. That means when I am faced with being without them, I have to start thinking, what am I going to do when I feel stressed? What are my resources to feel better when I feel worse? Now, I'm lucky. I've got a very active brain. I love to travel. I can come up with a huge list of things that are going to make me feel better if I start to feel stressed. It's not a big deal. It's a very minor, tiny anxiety I'm feeling about this separation, but interesting. You'll see it very often between male horses and female horses because that bond gets so strong. And I think mares are very, very good at helping the boy horses lower their stress. And so what happens is they become very, very dependent on their girlfriend to help them feel better when they start to feel worse. And if they are faced with the reality of living without that girlfriend, it becomes terrifying to think, what am I going to do if I feel stressed and I don't know how to feel better again? I'm dependent on that mare helping me feel better. So some people opt to just not let their horses live with mares. Like, it's too big a problem. I'm just going to never put my gelding with a mare. And that's an option. But I don't think it's the best option because you're denying the horse a really good source of good feelings. So if we can put our horses with friends that help them feel better, their quality of life is better. What I think we should do is add to their resources, not take away from their resources. So that means when we have a horse with separation anxiety, we need to give them more tools. How do you feel better when your girlfriend isn't there to help you? How do you feel better when you don't have the whole herd to help you feel better? Kathy says, I have a horse that's physically pushy and bites my 2-year-old. I've split them side by side paddocks. And listen, maybe I can see more here if I tap this. And listens, he's spooky. So would that be his stress release now that his normal towards her? So I'm not sure I understand, Kathy, but I think what you're saying is that now that you've split the two apart, there's a little bit more spooky behavior. And I would say that that's often seen. Many horses do that. When they lose their source of good feeling, they don't have enough alternate patterns to help them feel better. They're dependent on that one. And even if that one seems dysfunctional to us, there's too much biting or the playing is too rough, it's still a pattern that helps them feel better. So if we take away that pattern, we have to replace it with something else. So yeah, George, you've got a free range herd there on 5 acres. All of them are Mustangs. All of them grew up in herds. It's a really great situation for those horses to help each other feel better. And I think you've done a great job of setting that up. Some of them will be more prone to separation anxiety than others. And what I found is the horses that are the most prone to separation anxiety are the ones who are the most dependent on their friends to help them feel better when they start to feel bad. And so what we have to do is we have to come up with alternative strategies for our horse. When you start to feel stressed, what are some things you can do for yourself so that you can self-soothe so that you feel better without necessarily having your friends help you do it? And I know that the theory is very simple and the practice is much more complicated. But I would say that it's absolutely possible. I've taught it in a lot of situations. And in freedom-based training, we do a lot of work with focus. Because if a horse is more thinking and they're willing to change focus, They can change focus enough times to find something to focus on that makes them feel better. So what happens when you separate horses that don't want to be separate is they become hyper fixated on the lack of their friend. And when they hyper fixate on the thing that upsets them, they become more and more upset. And so what we do in freedom-based training is we teach them to change focus. Okay, if it's upsetting me to think about the fact that my friend is not here, what can I think about that causes me to feel better? And strengthening that muscle of being able to change focus to the thing that helps you feel better instead of the thing that makes you feel worse. This is one of the keys to helping horses get over separation anxiety. You just have to remember, if a horse is really anxious about being separated from their friends, it's because that friend causes them to feel better when their stress starts to get too high. That friend is an incredibly good resource for them. And I would prefer to add to the resources, give the horses more tools for coping with stress or anxiety, instead of trying to take away their one source of better feeling. Takes a little longer to do it the way I talk about. A lot of people just separate them and say, get over it. But I think that we need to give our horses more tools. And yeah, George, that's exactly it. Having that big bank account of trust means that when the horse starts to feel a little anxious, if they really trust me, and I say, why don't you look at this? Or why don't you move over here? Or why don't you think about something that I suggest? They trust me enough to say, yeah, I'll try that. I'll try that and see if I feel better. So, yeah, Cindy, we worked a lot with that with Merlin and Lassie. Move your feet before you get kicked. That ability to take an action or change your focus to feel better before you're going to feel worse is really important. And when the horses start developing that self-reliance, I know how to make myself feel better. I know how to act. I know how to think. I know how to focus. When they start having those tools, then if they lose their friend that helps them all the time, or they're separated for an hour, they have tools. They have an ability to cope. When their stress gets too high, they're not stuck there. They have the ability to lower their stress without the help of their friend. So Kim says, weirdest thing, my Mustang can go by herself on a separate pasture. Surprising coming from a herd environment. And all that tells me is that your Mustang grew up with a lot of good self-soothing tools. They had a herd, they loved their herd, but they don't feel like the herd is the only way they can feel better. And that's really important and just comes naturally for some horses. Yeah, absolutely. Lillian, the distance work that we do is another way that really helps strengthen their focus changes. And that really helps them discover they can change their focus. They can change what they're thinking about, and they can focus on the things that make them feel better and self-soothe instead of being so dependent on their friends to soothe them. So yeah, it takes a while. It's not fast, Lillian. I'm glad you pointed that out here. I'm not offering instant fixes at all. But once they learn it, once they learn to help themselves, it is sustainable. They can really dig into themselves and say, what do I need to do to feel better, instead of screaming for their friend that always helped them feel better. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, Warwick is doing really great focus work too. His is a slightly different angle on it than mine does, but ultimately we're both reaching for that same thing. A horse that's able to self-soothe so that they're not so dependent on their friends doing all the soothing for them. And it's interesting here with Atlas. He has a little bit of a different issue. He's sort of so sufficient. He doesn't have any separation anxiety as far as I can tell. So we're trying to work on the other thing. We want him to connect more with others, actually reach out and trust them and let them help him. He's very independent. I think he would be one of those stallions that would end up going off on his own if he was in the wild. If he couldn't win himself mares, of course. That's always the first option for a stallion. Yeah, Lillian, and that's the thing about this work. Even if we're doing this work and it takes a long time and our reason is for separation anxiety, it does translate to lots of other issues. When the horse knows how to self-soothe, when they know how to reach for a better feeling without help from their friends, it doesn't mean they can't accept help. It's great if they have help, but if they don't have help, they can do it themselves. And that is applicable to so many different situations. So this is the work I do. I do love riding. I do love lots of kinds of training, but this is the most interesting work with horses I've ever done, which is the psychological side of it. How do we help horses help themselves so that they can be the very best version of themselves that wants to collaborate, that wants to work together, that wants to be partners, but isn't anxious or upset when their partner has to go away for a while. So those are my thoughts for today. Thank you guys for joining me. Kathy asks, what would the first steps for this be? So Kathy, in my webinar that I put out there, Freedom-Based Training 101, I walk through a really simple process of exploring where you can be around your horse and whether the horse starts to think more or freeze more, whether they go into fight or flight. And what I find is if you can respond to the horse thinking and they see that you respond, they start to think more. And we just keep building on that. I see your thinking, I'm responding to your thinking, and I'm going to move to the next place. I see that you are feeling better, and I'm going to respond to that. The more they feel better, the more they get responses to it, the more they practice feeling better, and the more they start to realize they have power within themselves to do it instead of having somebody else cause it. It's really, really subtle work in the beginning, but as Lillian was saying, it's really sustainable over a long period of time if you put the work in. It is. It's a really beautiful slow dance. I agree, George. So it doesn't have to be everything you do, but if it's a part of what you do, you're going to find the horse starts to become much more self-reliant. When their stress naturally gets a little too high, which it does for all of us, they start to have solutions of how they're going to feel better without needing someone else to fix it for them. Yeah, exactly, Rachel. It is all about the journey. So thank you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful evening, wherever you are in the world. If you have subjects you would like me to speak on, drop me a message. I'm always looking for good ideas. Thank you.